Welcome to the Fourth Branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. The highest form of ignorance is when you reject something you do not know much about. John F. Kennedy said, "The ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all." Hello everyone, I am MD, and this is the Fourth Branch program. First, a warning. This program is not suitable for all audiences. I repeat, the content of this program is not for everyone. To find out if it's suitable to you, please answer the following two questions. 1. Would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? Question number 2. Would you have a non-pedophile cared for your toddler? Once again, would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? And question number 2, would you have a non-pedophile cared for your toddler? Your time is up, obviously. If you had difficulty answering either questions, this program is not for you. If you answer yes to either or to both questions, this program is definitely not for you. But if both of your answers are absolutely not, this program is catered exclusively for you, and you should stick around. It is enlightening, informative, educational, and above all, it is a very interesting topic to hear about. Stay with us as we come back to discuss with you the big divide in the country. Contrary to popular belief or to popular misconception, the big divide that has been talked about so much in the media and used by politicians and believed by most falls squarely on the shoulders of elected officials, the very people we elected: senators, congressmen, governors, mayors, those we selected and elected to work on our behalf, to represent our views, to implement policies which reflects the views that we cherish, and to entrust that they will compromise whenever and wherever that's necessary to advance the affairs of the people. Contrary to the wide misconception, the big divide between constituents of the two major parties, our research here at the Fourth Branch found the startling fact. The big divide resides almost exclusively among the elected officials, and they are at the roots of spreading the problem among the constituents. This is not a misprint. This is not a misread. In the past 3 episodes, we began the discussion of this topic. At the top of the discussion, in episode 1 in particular, we mentioned that there are 3 major factors which are at the roots of the big divide in the country. The first one is the elected officials. The second one is the constituent. And the third one is the ambivalence in the media. We did propose to discuss the bulleted point number 2 tomorrow, Saturday, at 10:30 a.m. Probably will continue in the afternoon at 6:30 p.m. But today, we will continue the discussion on the bulleted point number 1, in which we will continue to provide examples of actions, policies, and yes, even statements made by elected officials which have no other purpose but to divide the constituent. But before we proceed with the discussion of this topic, let's ask the question, why does it matter? Why does it matter there is a big divide in the country? The very expression itself suggests it is not something good. It's not something anyone would be looking forward to. Thus, it cannot really be good. Any sound-minded individual would want to move away from something that's not good. Don't you agree? In other words, it is bad. We know instinctively, intuitively, that a big divide among the constituents cannot be good for the country. We know the factors causing it. We have been discussing the first one. Today, we will provide further example to illustrate this very fact. We know the who, we know the what. Today we will also tackle the why. Why do elected officials? Why do individuals we elected, we picked to represent us, be it in Washington or in the states where we live? Why do those people, instead of doing the task for which we elected them, why do they work so hard to divide us, we, the constituents? Why? That's the big question. And of course, when we return, we will take a look at the very reason that they have behind dividing us as a nation. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Join me here on the Fourth Branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday. We were asking the question that we have elected officials, governors, mayors, senators, congressmen. We go to the poll, we vote them in office, we either send them to Washington or for our particular states, and we trust, because obviously all of the people who live in any particular state would obviously not be able to attend or to argue the matters that are of concern to them. So the country was structured in such a way that we select various group of representatives, both for our state and into the federal government, so that they can represent our views. Now, for the longest, the argument in the country has been the country is very divided, and that is an expression we've been hearing for a very long time now. Now, it is something that has been a concern of us here at Fourth Branch, and we decided to take a look at what really causing this big divide. Now, the media, and by the media we mean the media as a whole, seems to be under the impression the big divide is between constituents of the two major parties, meaning Democrat and Republican. Now, for the longest, we too believed that was the case until we decided to go and research the matter. And we found out, to our dismay, that yes, the constituents are also responsible, but the major aspect of the problem actually are on the shoulders of the elected official. There are three major factors: the elected official, the constituent, and the ambivalence in the media. And by our calculation, the elected official are somewhere between 70 to 80% responsible of the problem. They are at the roots of the big divide in the country. And we started this conversation before, so we're not just making a statement for the sake of making the statement. And I really encourage you to go into the People Branch YouTube channel to check out the other 3 videos we already posted there that provide plenty of examples to that effect. So it is not just a statement, it's not just assumption, it's not just speculation, but we have found out that indeed the elected officials are mostly responsible for the problem. And we give a few examples of such, and I'll use a couple of them now before we move on to the next example. The first one was the passing of the tax cut, $1.5 trillion tax cut that 60% of the people in the country oppose. 60%. Now, in a democratic system, the majority matters. Yes, that means there were 40% of the people who actually wanted the idea. But again, in a democratic system, the representative in Washington would have gone with the 60% that says, no, we don't want it, we don't like it. And for sake of conversation, we're not going to discuss that today, but we are currently working on that particular topic to show that there were very good reasons for the majority not to want it, and it so happened that it will actually be a burden not just for us, this generation, but it will continue to our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids will have to pay the price for that $1.5 trillion tax cut. But had the representative listened to the majority, then this would not have happened. So, example number one, this is one such case where a majority say, we do not want this, but the elected official, in that case, congressmen and senators, they say, the hell with you, we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. And we saw the exact same thing happen when Obamacare was enacted, the healthcare system. In the beginning, Republicans who did not understand the concept were against it, and we will talk about that also in the constituent aspect, and to show that it wasn't so much that the constituent would have been against it, it's because the elected official once again were behind the problem of that big divide. So for 62 times during the Obama administration that Republicans tried to get rid of Obamacare. And even during the Trump administration, they already tried twice to get rid of Obamacare. Despite the fact, and that's a kicker, despite the fact that today you have a number of Republicans who have realized that it is beneficial to them, and that's the reason now they support it, and yet the elected official, that is the president of the United States, as well as the senators, the congressmen, they want to get rid of something that's benefit the constituent. Once again, the major divide, the big divide in the United States of America is not between members of the two major parties, but it's rather between amongst the elected officials, the congressmen, the senators, the president, people that we chose, we picked to do things that's good for us. Those are the very people who are trying to do things that hurt us as long as it satisfies their own personal agenda. Yes, the big divide in the country is mostly caused by elected officials. Today, actually, for the past 8 years, since 2010, the Republicans have been in the majority in Congress and the Senate. So they have been at the roots of the problem we've been talking about, called the big divide. Now, here is something that is currently going on, and as mentioned, as provided, as illustrated in those two examples that I just gave you, Republicans believe, or at least the legislators are making decisions that do not just affect Democrats, because the individual, there are 20 plus million people who are covered under Obamacare. They're not 20 plus million Democrats. there are 20 million American citizens who have the privilege to be covered under the health plan. Pre-existing condition, they are protecting against that cap that insurance usually put in their coverage. They are currently covered under that. Children 26 years old can be covered under their parents. There are a number of reasons for legislators in Washington, Republican legislators in Washington, to expand such benefit for the sake of the people. And yet, they are gung-ho about doing things that are harmful to the constituent. And they're not just doing that against Democrats, because it's not just Democrats that are going to suffer of their action. So they are at the very roots of the big divide in the country. Again, as I mentioned, tomorrow we will tackle the aspect where the constituents are also responsible, but you will also see that despite the fact that the constituent bear some responsibility, but it so happened the problem originated from the elected official. Now, here's something that is currently making news in Georgia. Every time that there is election in the country, the discussion, there is a heated discussion in the Republican circle about voters fraud. Now, I want also to bring attention to you here in this conversation as well. This heated discussion that I just mentioned is not something that's happening within the constituency. That's not something that you meet Republicans all over the place talking about voters fraud. This heated discussion we're talking about occurs almost exclusively with elected officials. Yes, they are the one at the roots of the big divide in the country. And the heated discussion about voters fraud, and we have found as to this strategy used by Republican legislators, Republican governors, mayors, and so on, not because there is necessarily a problem, but because they realize that stirring a pot and saying that there is a problem and having Fox, which is the mouthpiece for the Republican Party, amplifying it, they can get to the Republican constituent, and hopefully that will start to spread, to trickle down and become a problem. That's exactly the same thing that they did when during the time that the Healthcare Act was passed under Obama. They came with death panel. They came with it's going to kill jobs. The Republican legislator, that is, they came up with all sort of lies, and we know that then, but it becomes obvious later on. None of that was true. And the last piece of lie that they came up with was it's going to die on its own, because everybody is going to realize that's not good. And it so happened, up to today, we're still talking about it. And this is the reason that I brought it this time, to explain one very specific detail about how the elected officials have been working diligently, aggressively, just to create division. They seem to forego the idea that their primary task is to solve problems and embrace an approach of creating problem which will help them divide the country even further. After they try everything possible to say how bad Obamacare is, now today, here's what they came up with. There is currently healthcare enrollment period has started. And there is a small window. It's not a lot of time. There is a small window for individual to enroll. So what Republican elected officials whose job is to facilitate the well-being of the constituents, what they came up with is to bring down the website during heavy enrollment period. You heard right. They know on Sundays, this is the time when most people have the time to sit at home with their family and discuss different aspects of what they may need and decide which plan to enroll to. What currently being done is the fact that the elected official decide that on Sunday they're going to make sure that the website is not available for enrollment. When I tell you that the elected official, Republican legislator, congressman, senator, governors, mayors, president, they all working to divide the country. They completely abandon the very purpose for which they were elected, which is to make your lives easier, to remove obstacles for you, to make certain you can take advantage of benefits that the government offers. But instead, they are working aggressively to make certain that you are harmed. And this is not speculation. This is what has been doing from Obama to today. Every Republican elected official has been working diligently to get rid of a plan, of a healthcare plan that actually benefits millions of people. Not millions of Democrats, millions of people. Now, when they found out that this is not what they thought was going to happen, the death panel campaign didn't work. The gonna cost job to the country did not work. It's a bad health plan did not work. They went to the Supreme Court to help kill it. It did not work. They tell people that it's gonna cost is gonna skyrocket and you're not gonna be able to afford it. That did not work. And the last thing that they came with, and they said, abandon ship, because the whole healthcare plan is just gonna fall on its own weight because it's not good. That did not work either. So the next course of action is to make certain that you do not have the opportunity to enroll and take advantage of it. Now, you can be a Republican or Democrat, or you can be neither. But you got to realize something is terribly wrong with that picture. For you to have people you elect, you place to represent you, to represent your view, to work towards doing things to make your life easier. That's why you pay them. We pay those people salaries. And yet, instead of working on your behalf, they work against you. Those are the individual. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican. The action that they're taking, what they are doing, will harm you regardless. So the idea of supporting your political party just because since you were a baby in diaper, you find that your father, your mother, your grandparents, your great grandparents are Republicans or Democrat, whatever, whichever case that may be, is not a good way of going to the poll and voting, because just because you were raised in an environment that tells you you're a Republican, now you have a brain of your own that helps you see what exactly is going on. Why would you keep doing the same thing over and over and over? Why would you keep sending the same people to Washington to represent you when in fact it is very clear they're not there to represent your views? Why would you do that? Now, here's the why. And I'm going to show you a very interesting example so that we can talk about the why that Republican legislators, congressmen, senators, governors, mayors are doing those kind of things to divide the constituent. Because you have to understand the why in order to see, to really grasp that they're not there for you. You may have elected them because somehow you manage to convince yourself that Republicans are better than Democrats. Whatever type of rationale you came up with to do that. But one thing is certain, that it is lunacy to do the same thing over and over and over and over and get the same result and keep doing the same thing. There is only one stupid animal that does that. It's porcupine. You put a porcupine inside a glass cage, and because it can see outside, it will hit the glass as many times until it bleeds. That's how stupid the animal is. It will try to get out, hit against the glass, go back and hit against the glass, do it again and again and again until it bleeds. Catch its breath and go and do it again and again and again. That's only that one animal that does that. That's so stupid. Because no one who has a brain would continue doing the same thing over and over and over and get the same result and continue to do that. That just doesn't make any logical sense. It's not part of the human species. Brian Kemp of Georgia, that guy is the Secretary of State. He is the individual responsible for the integrity of election. That's a big job, right? But it so happened that Brian Kemp is actually running to become the next governor of Georgia. Now, before I tell you any other part of the story, first, keep in mind that Brian Kemp is Republican. And second, without knowing any other aspect of the story, there should already be a bell in your head that says, okay, the guy is responsible to ensure the integrity of election in the state. He's bidding for the governorship in the state, and is a candidate currently who aspires to become the next governor. there got to be a bell ringing telling you conflict of interest, conflict of interest, conflict of interest, because any sound-minded individual who doesn't have anything that he would want to do bad in regard to the election would automatically see the problem and pass that part of the job to somebody else. Because you cannot possibly want to become the next governor. You're on the ballot. And you also the one who is responsible for the integrity of the election. In other words, the person who is going to certify votes. See the problem? He wants to be governor. There's going to be vote for governor during the midterm, and he's the one that's going to certify those votes. See the problem? Well, it so happened, you didn't ask me, but I'm going to tell you anyway. It so happened that Brian Kemp, already purged 53,000 votes, 53,000 voters from the list. 53,000 from the list. 70% of those voters that he purged from the list are minority, African American and Hispanic. See, I told you before I even get to this point, the conflict of interest were already an alarm bell saying that no, that guy cannot possibly be doing that job while he's vying for the governorship. And his excuse is trying to prevent voters' fraud. Remember I mentioned to you earlier that the minute that there is election, you can almost rest assured the Republican elected official will start invoking voters' fraud. From 2000 to today, it is already found, researched, analyzed by many different parties, independent parties, that is, organization. Voters' fraud does not exist. Other words, negligible. If we have a chance tomorrow, we'll bring that and show you that part because it may be important. But at 10:30 a.m., if you catch me, then we'll give you a brief synopsis of that aspect of voters' fraud. But back to Brian Kemp. It is very clear that there is a conflict of interest. Now, if he didn't have anything to hide, or he didn't intend to do anything wrong, any sound-minded individual would have said, okay, let the next person in line, deputy secretary, maybe, to take over the integrity of the election. He purged 53,000 voters from the list. But here's the kicker. Not a single one of those voters know that their name were purged. Not a single one. Now, how did we find out about that? Well, it so happened there is someone by the name of, I believe, in Georgia, and she found by sheer accident Marsha Appling Nunez. She's a teacher, college professor, and she was teaching students how to go online and register and so on and so forth. And that's when she found that even she was not registered. But the problem with her was the fact that for 6 years she has been voting consistently in the election in Georgia. Why was her name removed from the voters list? Ask Brian Kemp. His main line is trying to prevent voters' frauds. Now, you may not know anything about election, voting, how the whole process works. And you need not be a genius to understand this problem seems a little bit, it seems to be weird that you have a Secretary of State vying for the governorship and purging individuals who have been voting in the state for years. And those individuals, not just Marsha Nunez, all the 53,000 people that he purged from the list, those are not people who just register to vote. Those are people who have been voting regularly in Georgia. I told you there was an alarm bell that says conflict of interest. But here is where it gets really, really interesting. When you find out that Brian Kemp did not just purge 53,000 voters, 70% of which are minority, just be by accident or because he was concerned about voters' frauds and so on and so forth. And remember, I mentioned to you earlier, voters' fraud is only a topic that is used as a way for elected officials to propagandize the idea and hoping at some point it will catch fire and people, the constituent, will start being concerned. But here's where it gets interesting with Brian Kemp. He's vying for the governorship of Georgia. He's the Secretary of State who is responsible to certify voting counts. He purged 53,000 active voters, did not notify any of them to that effect, meaning when those people go to the poll, that's when 53,000 of them, when they go to the poll, that's when they're going to find out they're not registered. You got to admit this is Machiavellic, this is sneaky, this is dividing the country. And here's the reason. Remember I mentioned to you, we have to understand why those people do those kind of things in order to understand the reason behind the big divide. Now here's the reason. Brian Kemp happened to have as a challenger for the governorship of Georgia a black woman, Stacey Abrams, or Abrams, I'm not sure. Stacey is the individual who is challenging Brian Kemp for the governorship of Georgia. See the problem? She's black. 53,000 voters were removed from the voter list. 70% of them are minority. It doesn't matter. Accuracy doesn't matter. Honesty doesn't matter. Nothing matters to Republican elected official, because as far as they are concerned, their selfish agenda is all that matters. Now, why do you think Brian Kemp would do something like that? Do you think he really believes there is voters fraud? Of course not. It's already proven by so many different independent organizations that have looked at the issue over and over and over from 2000 to 2018, and they come out and they said, no, there is no such thing. So Brian Kemp is the ultimate individual who is so concerned about voters' fraud, and he purged 53,000 active voters in the state of Georgia. One has to be really stupid to believe that he is concerned about voters' fraud. Now, I could give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he was concerned about voters' fraud. But a good Secretary of State who went that route to remove 53,000 voters from the rosters would have sent letters to all of them and let them know that their name have been removed because there is some concern, so they need to re-register. That would have been fair. But that's not what happened. Marsha found out because she was trying to teach others how to register. Had she not tried to do that, she wouldn't have found out that she had a problem, because she's been voting in Georgia for 6 consecutive years, and she didn't think she had a problem. So yes, Republican elected officials are at the roots of the big divide in the country. It's not a speculation. It's not an assumption. It's not something that I picked out of my hat. It is example after example after example show you that indeed Republican legislators have been doing just that. Again, as I mentioned yesterday, this is not to say Democrats are not doing it, but it is unfortunate for the past 8 years, Republicans have been in the majority, and everywhere that they hold the government, the lever of government, they take advantage of doing exactly that, to divide the constituent. So no, the big divide is not among the constituent. It's mostly coming from the elected official. And the question that I promised to answer is very clear with the example I just gave you with Brian Kemp. The big divide benefits those elected officials. Because why do you think Brian Kemp doing that? Hopefully, those 53,000 voters that he purged would have gone to Stacey, but she would no longer get those 53,000 people. Then he will become the next governor. It's just about the individual. It has nothing to do with the constituent. In other words, if the majority picks Stacey, it doesn't matter, because as far as Brian Kemp is concerned, he is who matters. And as information trickle in, and people getting better and better information about what had happened, what do you think that does? It continues to divide the constituent. Because when you find out that this is what Republicans are up to, then if a Democrat was somewhat leaning towards maybe going along with a Republican in certain issues, but automatically they are now hardened in their position because they already realized that Republicans couldn't care less about the constituent. So that's the reason that those elected officials, Republican elected officials, do not do those things for better reason, for the benefit of the country, for the benefit of the constituent. They do it for their own personal benefits. As far as you, the constituent, they couldn't care less. When they tried to kill Obamacare, who do you think they were doing it against? Congress, Senate, elected officials in general, they have great coverage under the federal government or their respective states. So they weren't trying to kill Obamacare because they they care about you, your life. It's because it benefits their particular agenda. They have insurance companies that are lining their pockets as campaign time, campaign re-election. They get plenty of money, so they're doing things that benefit them, not you. You have to keep in mind that elected officials, in fact, it may be hard or difficult to comprehend, but I'm going to let you into a little secret. I don't go to the doctors for doctors to tell me the kind of treatment that I need if I need treatment. What I go to the doctors for is to understand what's wrong with me. And as far as the decision, what I need to do or not do about it, I don't let a doctor dictate that to me. And I can tell you, me in particular, I've been to the doctor. I've been at the brink of death. That doctor suggested a course of action to save me, and I said no. It's been more than a decade. I'm still here. And I tell you that for a simple reason. Not because it's that much, there is that much correlation with what we're talking about. It's because you, the individual you, is you are the only one who can make decisions that are good for you. Voting Democrat or Republican because you were raised in a home where your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather were Republican is preposterous. If you look at the landscape today, mostly, again, it's not because Democrats are not doing it, but mostly Republicans do not care an iota about the constituent. Everything that they do it for their own personal agenda. Now, if you happen to get a crumb out of it, you get a crumb, but it wasn't done for you. Good example, the tax cut. Despite the fact you hear this big drum roll, tax cut for the people, tax cut for the people, $1.3 trillion of that money went to large corporation and wealthy individual. 1.3. So no, it wasn't for you. So when you hear your elected official, it becomes your responsibility as a constituent to figure out exactly the truth behind it, not what they're telling you, because they will tell you what they think you want to hear. But the reality is not necessarily what they're telling you. Coincidentally, that's really the purpose of the Fourth Branch. We do not give the news. It's already everywhere. You can get them anywhere. What we strive to do with the Fourth Branch is to discuss topics which can impact your lives and give you some understanding of the action taken by the elected officials so that you can make those type of decisions. We do not care whether you're Democrat or Republican. We simply lay out the detail behind the action that those elected officials take, and you can take it from there. And that's exactly my approach with doctors. I go to the doctor, I say, Doc, what is the problem? And the doctor said this, that, and the other, bunch of tests, and tell me, I found this, or you have this, and or what are we gonna do about it? I say, no, Doc, I'm fine. Let's just tell me what I have, and I'll let you know what I decide. Because I take upon myself to decide what type of treatment I want to get, if I want to get treatment at all. So when you go to the store, and that's the example I always give to anyone who say, why would you do something like that? When you go to the store to buy clothing, shoes or whatever, you don't let the cashier decide. The cashier can make a suggestion to you. The salesperson can make a suggestion. This dress looks nice. This pair of shoes looks good. But they're not going to force those things on you because you want to make your own decision as to how you want to look. So why would you leave the most precious thing of you, which is your health, to someone who simply want maybe to push a drug, to do surgery on you because it costs money. It brings more money to the establishment. You, the individual, should start taking hold of your life. The elected officials are not doing anything for you because I proved it now 4 times with example after example that they are at the roots of the big divide in the country. We will discuss the negative impact of a big divide in the country. But for now, you know the who, the what, and now you know the why. The who are the elected officials. Yes, your Republican representative are the one at the root, at the big divide of the big divide in the country. That's a what? The big divide. And the why, they do it because it benefits them. They couldn't care less about you. You just don't matter. They may want you to think you matter because when they need your vote, when they need your support, they have to say, you matter. But if you look at their actions, don't listen to what those people are saying. They can sell you the moon, and they have. But see what they're doing. Only 38% of the people in the country supported Brett Kavanaugh to become the next justice. 38%. That's not a majority. And yet, Republican legislators push him into the Supreme Court. Yes, this is, you do not matter. In a democratic system, it's the majority that matters. And time and time and time again, Republican legislators for the past 8 years have proven beyond a shred of a doubt that you do not matter. Yes, there may be the minority who feel great about themselves, but as I always mention, if you're in the minority and you see that your representative are doing that, even if it benefits you, you should be concerned because the shoe will not always be their feet will not always be in that shoe. So what happened when it's on the other feet? It's on the other shoe. When there is another group that running the show, would you want the minority to prevail? Of course not. In a democratic system, which is what we have here in the United States, it's the majority that matters. No matter how bad it feels as a minority, when it comes time for your representative to take action, they ought to listen to the majority. And if they're not doing that, then we have a problem. Literally speaking, we have a serious problem. I'll be right back. In 1996, A small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy. Constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies, presenting to its audience as news, Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a recent survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. Republicans' constituents are still in the dark. Most Republicans, especially those who still support Donald Trump, live very largely in the dark despite the wide availability of the internet. The cause of the problem is not lack of information, but rather an inclination to seek for sources of information which support their preset views, however false and misleading those views are. As such, Trumpublicans are more inclined to reject any information which does not support their views, does not please them, or is critical of Donald Trump. They do not have to look far. Fox propaganda network, known and referred to by most as Fox News, is the major source of misinformation, distorted information, wrong information, and even outright lies. Other sources such as Rush Limbaugh, Breitbart, and InfoWars have all contributed greatly to nurture and preserve the dummification of the Republican Party. The problem is exacerbated by the GOP legislators who also push false narrative in order to consolidate their base, even to the detriment of the country. Such posture on the part of the Republican leaders and the GOP propaganda network represent the main conduit to taking the country down the gutter. Who in the Republican Party will muster enough courage now that John McCain is gone, in order to shine the light for the Republican constituents? as of this moment, most in the Republican Party still live in the dark. I thank you for spending the time with me, and I hope to see you tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. when we will be discussing the bulleted point number 2, which is the constituent. Remember, the topic is the big divide, and we have been talking for the past 4 days about the major aspect of the big divide, which is the elected official. Again, this is not speculation, this is not assumption. I invite you to check out the People Branch YouTube channel for those videos and to get a sense and to hear about the examples how the Republican legislators have been working very aggressively to divide the constituent. And tomorrow we will tackle the part the constituent is responsible for. So at 10:30 a.m., I invite you to join me for the second part of what is causing the big divide in the country. I hope you have a good afternoon or a great evening, whichever that happens to be. I hope to see you again next time. Good day. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.